Today on the show, Donald Trump commits his most egregious act of war in either of his terms. Fraud is discovered in Minnesota, and Americans threaten a tax strike. We're going to talk about all that, possibly a little bit more. This is the We the Patriots podcast. I'm your host, Sal Assante. Let's get right into it. So, happy New Year to you all. I hope you've all seen the news. And again, I apologize for being a day late, but may have a little bit of an updated story to go with. So at least there's pluses and minuses to everything, right? So getting right into it today. Donald Trump commits his most brazen act of war ever, and that is the capture of Maduro. So what happened here? Basically, to sum up a long history of a hellhole in Venezuela, two regimes, Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro, have driven that country into a borderline communistic society. And of course, most power at that point is going to top in quite a dictatorship. In seeing this, Donald Trump has been feuding with Venezuela since he's been in, whether he's talking about not using their oil reserves, not allowing people to be free, all this, that. And so what happened was a seemingly night raid situation. Airstrikes were launched, and in doing so, loosened up the capabilities of the Venezuelan military, and United States forces, I believe Delta Force, swept in and captured Maduro, brought him back. He's currently being held in New York, of all places, which is interesting to me. Furthermore, the implications of this are pretty dire, and I think it's important for us to discuss those then discuss how cool of a military action, whether I support or don't support what was done, because at the end of the day, I'm not really a fan of any acts of war that are aggressive. But when it comes down to it, what's going on in Venezuela is going to be pretty interesting, because taking away a leader like that is something that is frowned upon, I would say, in terms of how war has been conducted since civilization, really. Although the thought process is pretty simple to follow, where you topple the leader, you're going to topple the entirety of a fighting force and possibly a nation, when we talk about it in a modern sense. That way of going about war has been, so to speak, frowned upon for quite some time. Whether you look back on all the way back to all revolutionary wars, civil wars, American Civil War, the World Wars, they were not going after the leaders so much as they were trying to undermine the entirety of the regime. When it came down to, for example, Hitler in World War II, it was a little bit different. There were multiple assassination attempts. There were attempts to coup him. But at the end of the day, this is not really the modus operandi of the United States and Western powers for quite some time. This is different, and I find it interesting also in a sense of, we've seen, especially as Americans, but around the world, we've seen what regime change wars can do. You can reference almost the entirety of the Middle East. You can look at the institution of Israel as a nation, what kind of turmoil that has started. You can look back, of course, more recently at Iraq and Afghanistan, or Libya, what's going on in Somalia, all of these different places, especially Iraq and Afghanistan, something that Trump spent lots and lots of time railing against Bush, especially in the lead up to his 2016 election. You would think he would understand that going after these type of regime change wars is going to cause an issue. Seemingly, he either does not care, he has a cabinet who's pushing him to make decisions he's not comfortable with, or he's completely changed his attitude. Now, where it becomes very interesting is that, for example, when it came down to someone like Saddam Hussein in Iraq, the amount of effort, the amount of time that it took in order to get Saddam out of power, pretty much leading to an entire full-scale military occupation in order to extract him and kill him in that sense. This is very different. The entirety of the regime has not been toppled. It's just the leader that has been caught, leader and his wife been caught. And with that being the case, it's obviously very important that Trump and the administration as a whole have an idea of what their plan of managing the resources, the nation as a whole, that they have a plan going forward, because otherwise it's just going to fall into chaos. A lot of it reminds me of one of my favorite podcasts of all time, Mike Duncan's Revolutions, and watching what happened with Simon Bolivar. Basically, the entirety of South America, all across most of the Latin speaking nations in South and Central America. And when you look at those histories, so much of that, I think there was actually not to sidestep too much, I think there was a Twilight Zone, and that may be a little bit too old for my audience here, but if you get it, you get it. There was a Twilight Zone that was depicting what it's like in the Hispanic speaking nations of South and Central America. And it's just a constant state of revolution where people are attempting to essentially call out the corruption of the existing government, to say how much better they are, go in, kill the existing leader, usurp them, and as soon as they usurp them, they see that themselves in the mirror is the same as the old. And now they're fighting off revolution from the get-go. And this is the situation, of course, that you want to avoid, as Donald Trump. But what he's come out and said is that they have tons of resources, like oil, that they want to take care of. The United States is going to govern, or they're going to run the place, quote unquote. And when you look at that possibility, it's a scary proposition, to say the least. First thing that comes to mind to me is the amount of money that we're going to be spending in order to properly domain over these people. Do the people want this? All of the videos that I've been seeing where big time Trump supporters are putting out that Venezuelans are happy, they're celebrating in the streets, Maduro's gone, this and the other. Almost every video that I've come across, I'm pretty sure every video I've come across is either fake or a video from 6-7 years ago where they're celebrating something completely different. So, we don't know whether these people in Venezuela actually want this to happen. We don't know what the power structure in Venezuela looks like. We're going to have to wait and see on that. And wait and see has been my favorite word to use lately. And it's not I'm not saying it in a good way. I hope you can understand. I'm saying it because so much of the stuff that Donald Trump does when we're talking about his policy is uh, just a shot in the dark. It's a loose cannon. You don't know where he's trying to go with it. And when something like that occurs, I have to wait and see how it plays out. It's something like the tax on tips, tax on overtime thing that clearly is not coming into fruition, or at least not in the way that Trump thought. You had to wait and see because it was a different proposal that anyone's come up with for the past, I don't even know how long, at least since my lifetime, but I'm sure quite a bit further than that. And so when it comes to things like this, this is very big. There's geopolitics involved. We're just going to have to wait and see. And it's, it's not my favorite thing to have happened. And we're going to get into domestic politics, and I think you'll understand why I'm saying that. So if there's anything I missed, any facts I missed, I was trying to do a quick little overview of what happened with Venezuela. Let me know in the comments what I missed as well. If you're a huge supporter of this, let me hear why. If you hate the fact that we went and did this, then let me know why. Again, I'll find myself, just to clarify, I'll find myself somewhere in the middle, leaning towards I'm not happy that we did it. That being said, if it leads to people of Venezuela actually getting some of their freedom back, having the ability to vote in elections and their votes counting, then, it could be a net positive. So I'll keep my mind open, so to speak. But in general, again, when it comes to wars of aggression, I'm very against it. This was clearly a war of aggression. Oh, and I might want to add here that there was no congressional approval. This was done completely on the authority of the President of the United States. And that is another reason I'm not a huge fan of the actions that were taken. If we could ever get back to, which I don't think will happen, if we can ever get back to a point where congressional approval is sought in order to go to war or commit acts of war, which this so clearly was, then I might be in a lot more support of what we do as a nation, militarily speaking, rather than just the diktat of the top coming out and unilaterally making a decision that we are going to war. Our boys are going to be on the front lines, and people are going to be in danger, both in the physical sense and also in the sense of the context of the world and how people view us. With that said, I think that it's kind of important to point out, stay kind of on this topic, is that Trump may have been in the same conference as him announcing the capture of Maduro, may have been a separate conference, announcing that he is reigniting his desires for Greenland. I don't know if many people remember this. This was a part of his campaign as well, where he wanted to change it to the Gulf of America. That's already done. The Gulf of Mexico being Gulf of America now. What's up with Greenland is actually pretty fascinating. The people of Greenland don't seem to be too supportive. Denmark, owner of Greenland, is definitely not supportive of it. And as he came out and made, I would say, quasi threats against a sovereign people, the world itself pretty much rejected. Now, you look at Europe's response, it's been weak. They've been weak on everything. So I don't count that so much. But with Trump going out and saying this, there were many people that I was seeing that said if there's any aggressive action taken towards Greenland, then it's going to be considered the breaking of NATO. Now, if we remember back to Trump's first term, he's not the biggest fan of NATO. I think a lot of people are not that big of fans of NATO. I myself would find myself somewhere in that crowd. The reason being, of course, is that nobody really is putting in their fair share in order to help the United States reach whatever military or global international law kind of goals that we set. We are setting the standard. We are putting in the most amount of funds and we are reaping the least amount of benefits. From that standpoint, I could totally understand. Now, the one thing where breaking NATO and being the belligerent force in this case, what the United States would be, is that, well, you have try not to be cheesy and use like World War II reference, but you basically do what Germany did by declaring war in the United States when it was completely unnecessary after Japan attacked the United States. You allow basically every force that is in that existing block of nations to come after you as the United States. And therefore, I'm not too big of a fan of it. Now, there's a difference as to whether, if there was a case, if Denmark actually wanted to sell Greenland, then it might make sense, both for strategic purposes, for resources, a combination of those factors. But the fact that there seems to be a decent amount of pushback from Denmark and Greenland themselves, Greenland leadership, tells me that this is a pedal that Donald Trump might want to take his foot off the gas of. Now, we'll see where that goes as well. My guess is that the Greenland idea is not going to be something that stays in the news for too long. It might have been a distraction point, whatever it might be. My guess is that it's not going to last long. Maybe he was hoping that, and I apologize for it sounds like I'm just stooping for Trump, but I'm just trying to get into his head a little bit, even though it's impossible. Maybe he was hoping Denmark wanted to sell. Maybe he was hoping the people of Greenland would be a little bit more on board. It doesn't seem like that's the case. And so in doing so, might be invoking something he does not want to do. My guess is this did not make the news past. So get that. Now, moving on to domestics and why people might be getting rather upset. There was an awesome video that came out. I did not make it all the way through, but it is fascinating. And that is a video on Twitter, I believe on YouTube as well, by a guy that goes by the name Nick Shirley. Now, Nick Shirley has been uncovering fraud in the state of Minnesota for quite a bit of time now. I want to say well over the last few months. And where you see all of these state funds, you look back to the 2024 election with Tim Walz running as VP and the debate that he had with Jim Vance on how he come on and on about Minnesota's state program for giving funds for things like childcare, education, all of these different things, these points that, and come to find out that a significant portion of that money has been going to fraudulent activity. Now, the huge swath of this money that was uncovered to be fraudulent, or used in fraudulent ways, I should say, was uncovered in the Somali community. And this is something that is definitely interesting. I would go and take a look at the video, don't take my word for it. But basically, from what I've seen, there's a possibility of billions and billions of dollars being defrauded from Minnesota government and in turn the federal government, because the federal government gives grants for a lot of these things. Setting up daycares where there is literally not a child in sight. Nobody even talking about elder care facilities, talking about places that are for the public good, and yet all it is a basically tax harvest and taking people's money away from them, the taxpayers, I should say, and redistributing it to people that have a little outlook in terms of what they're doing for their fellow man and the country as a whole. These Somali communities have sparked quite a story online. To me, I want to see more research that's done on it. As much as I have a ton of respect for Nick Shirley and the work that he's done, I want to see officials reporting on it. Really not seeing this in the news at all. I think maybe Fox News did a piece on it. That's not a good sign when you have literally nobody paying attention to it except for podcasters and Fox News. But hopefully more stuff comes out on it. Hopefully we get more numbers of how much has been defrauded, how many different institutions have been defrauding the government, and is it really localized to the Somalian community? Is it possible that it is widespread and the she was discovered in the Somali community? This is not the first time that this stuff has happened. Of course, you look first to Governor Tim Walz, absolutely, but also Minnesota Congresswoman, I believe. Could be I don't think she's a senator. Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who hails from Somalia, and you wonder the connection there. Is she involved? Is she now the cover up? Is she the one that decided to go? Is she a beneficiary of any of this money? Or the same thing can be asked of, well, is he a beneficiary of any of this fraud? And if that's the case, well, it's ridiculous. And there should be people that are having their heads put on the line rather than the American people continuing to siphon funds out of their pocket. Now, coincided with this is one of my favorite stories from the past couple of weeks since the new year, and really already seems to have lost its traction, but I think it's something very important to talk about when I get back to a little series that I've been doing on specific talking points. When I talk about taxes, it's going to be another talking point that I want to hammer on. One thing that came out and people were pretty adamant about it, at least on Twitter. I saw some things on Instagram as well, but spend much less time there. And that's the fact that people to go on a tax strike. They do not want to pay their taxes this year. And, I am a fan of that. When it comes down to it, I think that as I've talked about many times on the show, I think that the income tax in general, federal income tax at least, is a abuse of power. It was instituted during World War One and has never really looked back. World War One might have been instituted right before, in 1913. And so it was supposed to be a temporary measure. It's here to stay. I think that it is unconstitutional for the United States government to take a certain percentage of your money before you ever see it. And so I'm all in favor of that, taking our money for welfare state, with Social Security, with Medicare, Medicaid, all of these different programs. I am a fan of paying. However, there's a massive problem here, and that is that the mass majority of Americans are getting paid via W-2, W-4 paycheck. If you are getting paid in this way, you already have your taxes withheld in your account. Doesn't matter whether you want to pay the tax or not. Just because you don't file your taxes doesn't mean you didn't pay the tax. We all take our paycheck home. We see that 20, 30, 40% or more missing from a paycheck that is not there because the government got involved. Whether that's state, federal combined, all of the entitlement spending, all of this together is taking away a significant portion of all of our paycheck, and that's before any of us are even seen. Now, the caveat there, of course, is if you're a business owner, if you're a 1099 contractor, you are in a little bit different space where you could feasibly not file your taxes and not be paying, the money that you kept aside to pay your taxes like normal, you won't pay. I get it, but here's the thing. If you do that, I don't think there will be enough people that do that. And odds are you will have your ability to conduct business significantly hampered, if not stopped completely, and you'll probably be going to jail for tax evasion. So don't think that it's the best because we are in a system where we now, if you get to a position, which I am a strong advocate for, we can get to a position where our tax money is not for me. One of the biggest reasons that withholdings happens, from what research I did from quite some time ago, so I'll get it fresh, and I could be wrong, so let me know. One of the biggest reasons that our withholdings even happen is that the federal government and regulators, basically there's two thoughts. Number one, Americans are too stupid. They're going to spend all their money. They're not going to have the money to pay the taxes at the end of the year. We must withhold. Okay, that's number one. Number two, there is an entire professional class, VAs, lawyers, white collar workers who are basically dedicated to tax law. And we can't just take them out of a job by allowing people to handle their own taxes by themselves and not have withholding, not have payroll company and all this stuff. And so you need to uphold this. So that combination of people being too stupid to do their own taxes and manage their own spending so that they don't overspend all this that, and the professional class need to be upheld is why withholdings happens in the first place. If we can just if we can get to a point where taxes are feasible, where my idea of a perfect tax would be a flat tax of 10% across the board, right off out of it, 10%, you don't pay sales tax, you don't pay all you don't pay taxes on self-debt, on investments, taxes on inheritance, all this. You wipe out all that other stuff and a 10% flat tax. Everything that's sold, everything that's earned, whatever, and that's the only tax we pay. I'm very much in favor of that, and I think that Americans would be smart enough to deduct 10% of their earnings, keep it on the side, and pay the tax. When you get to a system like that, then a tax should actually hold some weight. The reason that it would hold some weight is that everybody's in a position to withhold their tax money because they're upset about the government. When we're in this position where the government is not truly representative of the will of the people anymore, it hasn't been for some time, we are in a position where our money is being see it. And you add up a lot of those factors as well. Other factors I mentioned where a tax strike by the American people is not doing this. And I understand that whether you're upset about Venezuela, you're upset about what's going on in Venezuela, you're upset about what's happening migrants in general, or you're upset about what's happening with Israel, sidetracked too badly. There was another and just coming over to try to talk Trump into attacking Iran. We already had the most blatant act of war under Trump's presidency earlier in the year, which is early last year, I should say, when Trump attacked Iran and basically got away with it. And now we're seeing a pretty big step up, I would say, in terms of acts of war, going after the head of a state, airstriking them, capturing and basically kidnapping a head of state. We've seen quite an escalation in Donald Trump's willingness, I would say, to commit acts of war. And now we have Netanyahu coming in to try to convince Trump to do another one. Whether you're upset about all the other things that I've mentioned, or you're upset about our relationship to Israel, you're upset about us sending money to Israel, you're upset about us supporting the war in Gaza. I'm on board with 99% of those clauses. I do not like what's going on in a lot of cases, and I'm very disappointed in the Trump government, especially since I thought that it could have been a significant increase in the abilities of the United States as compared to a terrorist walls nation. Now, with that being said, taking all that into account, the tax strike just doesn't make sense. If we don't go and file our taxes, but we're all W-2, W-4 people, well, then we're just not claiming the money that we are out at the end of the day. Those withholding companies are going to have to pay it anyway on our back. At the end of the day, I don't think the tax strike is really going to be worth it. I think that we need to get better fixtures of to these spots. What it seems like to me from the outside, the amount of things happening militarily and just around the country, and especially coming from having it coming from the Trump administration, what it seems like the death by 1,000. What I mean by that is our attention as a nation, specifically at the top leadership, Donald Trump himself, he's so scatterbrained. He's doing so many different things, whether it's military action, whether it's pie in the sky ideas over here in the States domestically, things that really aren't, at the end of the day, helping out the average American and are making the wealthy class wealthier, making the government blob bigger and more powerful. More and more that we continue to feed into that and allow leaders to step in and think that their decision making has to be on that scale rather than having a small scale, local scale, domestic scale, helping out Americans. Less and less our quality of life is going to be here in the United States as Americans, and the more and more our money's going to outflow. And my death by 1,000 cuts. When I say that, I mean if we could just bring our attention in and focus on inner city violence. And we no longer cared about starting wars or continuing war, funding wars or funding other countries. And we focus solely on ourselves, focused on inner city communities, lowering our crime rate. What can we do for education? What can we do for, getting drugs off the street? I think that we could be a great nation. I think that we can slowly start to turn our tides back to the place that we should be. But instead, by having this ADD, so to speak, at the top, which I do think Donald Trump has quite a bit of, when you're talking about this inability to focus and get a job done, well, this is what you're going to see. You're going to continue to see our money be thrown into basically a dumpster fire, and our inflation rate's going to continue to go up. Our quality of life here in the United States is going to go down, and you're going to be stuck, left footing the bill, which now has been passed on generations and generations. And I'll leave it on this. I saw a really funny graphic that uh, it was the years that the past years of the presidential election, who had got in, and what it didn't matter who it was, what the age of the president that got. And I think basically for the last like 9 or 10 election cycles, it's been someone from the 1940s. You have not gotten younger in the presidential seat ever, except for Obama, maybe. And that's just disappointing, man. Like, we can't find ourselves to get away from this. It's hard to say the easy to say line, but this boomer class can't get away from that. We can't get them out of our midst. I think we just need some new thinking in there. We need some new people, and we need people that are willing to just break that party line. Forget about toe the party line. Forget about being able to play ball with the other side. We need to break it. We need to be able to do some common sense things that just make fucking sense rather than continuing to throw shit at the wall like we have been for so long. And I got this out of the way. Next week I'll be coming back. Unless something crazy happens, I'll be coming back to find my series quote unquote, where I'm just talking about topics and giving my thoughts on them, backed up by information. Hope you guys enjoyed the show today. I hope you guys have a wonderful new year. I will catch you guys next week. Love you. I'm sorry for the episode being late. I think you guys can accept me and be nice to me and don't attack me with that. I love you guys. Let me know what you thought.
I wish I were the fucking state. I wanna be something, not nothing. Trapped inside my dream and I'm running away from these demons. But the feeling's so good, I'ma keep dreaming.